Glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down, glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down, no more sickness, no more sorrow. Since I laid my burden down, no more sickness, no more sorrow. Since I laid my burden down, oh glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down, glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down, hey. Sickness, Lord, no more sorrow. Since I laid my burden down, yeah, no more sickness, no more sorrow. Since I laid my burden down, oh, the glory, glory, since I laid my burden down, oh glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my glory down, oh now glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my glory, glory, hey, hallelujah. Well, since I laid my burden down. Good morning.
Yeah, well, we're awake. Well, that wasn't so my job's done. You're awake. We can go have coffee downstairs in the fellowship hall now. But let's just add to it a little bit. Wow. So the theme for this year that I'm trying to live from and that I want to talk about over and over again is radical spirituality. And I realize that I really should check out the word and see what it means. Radical can be a slang word for excellent and cool. So it could be excellent spirituality, cool spirituality. But also one of the definitions is very different from the usual or traditional or extreme. So we have the radical right, we have the radical left, whatever that is. Usually this says they're radical and this says they're radical, but that's not what we're getting at. What I think is interesting is different from the usual or the traditional. So I want to go back to the definition of, one of the definitions of being in this incarnation, and it comes from Pierre Desjardins. Let's just, what a long name. God bless his mama. Desjardins. Let's just say Pierre Desjardins. And he said that we are we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And how many of you, when you hear that, you kind of resonate with it? But I would say that what's usual is that we still act like human beings, trying to be spiritual once in a while, having a spiritual thought once in a while, seeking a connection once in a while. And yet, what if we really are spiritual? That's our essence. And that we lived radically as though that was true. And we come from that. That's the context of our existence. That's the context of our existence. I want to get into that. Rabbi Olivier, who is the rabbi for Bet Aleph, who is sharing space with us, he said that we are similar, his synagogue, and we are similar because we understand the divine, which invites practitioners. And a practitioner just means I practice. So those of you that practice what we teach, you are practitioners of what we teach. So he says, we invite practitioners to know themselves and the world as sacred expressions of the most holy. Sacred expressions of the most holy. I love that beautiful song, And Everything is Holy Now. And I said, remember that song, Everything is Holy Now? We just wake up to everything is holy now. So I want to allow us to move into that space where we can understand that everything's holy now. That means us, and that means everyone we meet, and that's everyone we hear about, which could be radical. Radical. And to do that, we need to move out of our heads, because our heads have a story. This month is about the stories we tell ourselves, the never-ending stories that have been told throughout existence and that we've told ourselves. How many of you know you're telling yourself the same story a lot? And when that happens, it's just a loop. But to move out of that story, we have to move into our heart, into our wisdom center. So I'd like you to put one hand, any hand on your heart, and any hand on your solar plexus, which is where you call your gut. And really breathe in there. Breathe into that space. And so I give thanks that it is the Spirit of God, the Spirit of truth, the Spirit of holiness that now speaks to us and ignites within us the memory of who we are and who we've always been. In fact, not even who, but what. And that wisdom reveals to us another story, an older story, an ancient story of our divinity and our worthiness and our capacity to create wonderful things for ourselves and for others. And so it is. So let's just move from there as we let our heart listen and remember. I think that gatherings like this exist so that we can remember together. So we just remember. There's nothing you're going to ever hear that's going to be totally radically new, but hopefully the radical part will be let's use this, live this, because we've heard a lot of things. I think we're here to remember together some old truths that that we all know it in some way. How many of you have ever had an aha, eureka experience, and yet it seemed familiar? The eureka part of it was, oh, I'm getting it. And then there's a part of us that goes, yeah, I know. It feels almost like home When we have a eureka experience, it lifts us up out of our old story, but it feels like we're going home. It's something so familiar, and yet something that we haven't been thinking about. So it's new and old at the same time. New and old at the same time. I love that part. Rabbi Shapiro said that what God is, God's definition, Rabbi Shapiro's definition of God is what's going on. So you have a eureka experience of a new awareness of what's going on. Ernest Holmes explained that experience this way. He said, the science that you are to practice is based on the theory that there is a universal mind, an eternal spirit, from which all things spring. We think of spirit as an infinite presence in whom we live, move, and have our being. Each has a unique incarnation of this infinite presence, which Plato called the divine mind. We believe that this spirit is personal to each one of us because it is incarnated in a unique way in each one of us. So it incarnates uniquely, expresses itself uniquely, and we get to experience it in a unique way. Now, one of the things that having that experience does, and it helps us navigate the stuff that goes on in the world, because stuff still happens in the world, even to spiritual people. We don't get inoculated from stuff. I could call it something else, the stuff that I take out of the barn. With 2 horses, that's about 100 pounds a day. That's a lot of stuff. And some of you, how many of you know that you've had a lot of stuff in your life? Now, there's a difference between stuff and the suffering about stuff. We cannot prevent stuff, but spirituality, living as though we were connected to something, can help us alleviate the suffering about stuff. And that's our choice, and that's really what I want to tell you about today. I was inspired to read a book. It's called The Awakening Brain, and it's about the physiology of spirituality. The Awakening Brain, the New Science of Spirituality and Our Quest for an Inspired Life. It's by Lisa Miller. She's a PhD. And Siri, stop talking to me. Just show me what I want to see. Thank you. I plugged this thing in. It's like she's recording my whole talks. Love intelligence. Anyway, so what she did was she was a devout Catholic, and she wanted to prove that spirituality had an effect on how people thought. But she was also, because she was a scientist, she didn't want it to be like, I feel better, now I don't feel better, I have better resources, which is all kind of subjective. She wanted objective proof that spirituality has a beneficial effect on the brain and how people function, how they react, how they cope, how resilient they are, how many opportunities they see. That's what she wanted to do. So she got together with a bunch of colleagues at Columbia University, and they did a study. They did a study asking people whether they were depressed or not depressed, how they were, how they saw life, so on and so forth. They also asked, how involved are you in some sort of spiritual practice? So they saw all of this, and they noticed that people involved in a spiritual practice were less depressed. Okay, that's still subjective. It could be that, you've just done your prayers and you feel a little better when they ask the question, or I'm not supposed to feel bad, or who knows. But she wanted objective evidence. So they started taking MRIs of the brains of people. And what they found is that the people who had a practice, not necessarily Catholic, not necessarily Christian, but a practice to connect with the divine, their brains were healthier. They were more alive, they were more on fire, they were thicker, they were healthier, they weren't shriveling, especially in cognitive ability, and in this part of the brain that allows us to have unitive consciousness, which means that we are not so isolated. There's a part of our brain that can see connection. The parts of our brain that could see connection and that could perceive connection and honor connection, that part of our brain, the part that knows unitive consciousness, was lit up because of spiritual practice. And so it's like, yeah, there's the theory, and then here's the objective evidence. And all of her colleagues were like, oh, Lisa, maybe you were right. So she wrote a book about it. I just gave you the synopsis. I've saved you $15, and that's on Kindle. So, how many of you would like the benefit of unitive consciousness? I see a lot of hands, and some people just shaking their heads, some people not doing anything. First service, who I try things out on, we had one gentleman, he was so honest. Everybody else, first service, this guy, right where you're sitting, he goes, And he was honest, because little me's not really sure that it wants to have a life that's beyond what it knows, and me knows how to cope. We know what's normal. We know what's natural. Why do radical? Why not just show up like once a month at this center and sing some good songs and call it good? Why like move out and be shifted? Why see the big picture when we know what the little picture is? And that's normal. Because we like normal. Because it's knowable. What if this could radically change you? Who wants to have radical spirituality now? I love it. More people are like, give me the lowdown first. And I think that's good. So let's go with this. First of all, it will address something. This radical spirituality will address something that Linda Miller was very concerned about, and that was depression. She said, we live in an age of unprecedented mental anguish. Depression, anxiety, substance abuse have reached epidemic proportions. 31% of Americans, and this was in 1917 before the pandemic. 31% of American adults will develop full-blown anxiety disorder at some point in their lives, 19% in any given year. The World Health Organization reports that almost 250 million people on the planet are depressed, and depression is the third most costly disability worldwide. Each year, 17 million American adults are depressed. Over 16% of youth in the late adolescence currently face depression. And the impact of depression on suicide accounts for the second leading cause of death in adolescence, right after accidents. And that's what she wanted to address. And what she found was, with a spiritual practice, the brain's ability to handle that shifted. The brain got healthier. The brain got healthier. So now who would like to have unitive consciousness? All right. First of all, desire. You got to desire it. That's why I wanted to tell you everything, and I wanted you to either sign up or sign out. But I need to go beyond seeing the universe as either a vending machine or Santa Claus or an absentee parent, and actually see it as a living thing that we exist in. A living thing that we exist in, that we exist with. That we are, as the mystics would say, one with all that's going on. We are one with the earth, with the sky, with the birds, and with people that we like and don't like. We're all one. We need to realize that we were brought into a story of separation. So, yes, there's the grand plan. We need to desire this, but to desire this, you need to know where you are. So if you were going to go anywhere, it doesn't matter where the where is. If you don't know where you are, you don't know how to get there. Isn't that true? So, it was a really funny commercial. Can I just have a rant here? It's a small rant. Why do I pay for Hulu and they still give me commercials? I'm done. That's my, don't complain. I'm not complaining. I'm just curious. But one of the commercials is this guy outside of his car saying, I'm not lost, I'm just exploring. And by the way, do you know where I'm at? Because if you don't know where you're at, you don't know how to get to where you're going to go. So here's where we are at as a culture. We were brought up into a story of separation. We were brought up into a story of isolation. Even though we might have had a family, part of our development is to go from no identity to the me identity. Isn't that being a teenager? You have to self-identify. You have to see that. But some of us don't grow out of that. So it's the story of the creation in Genesis. And by the way, there's two stories in Genesis, written by separate authors, different authors at different times. One is very spiritual. And God created, and God created, and God created. And if you watch what God created or pay attention, it is sort of how the scientists think that the earth evolved. Very spiritual. This guy was high on God and could see how things had happened. And every time it was created, God said it's good, and God said it's good, and God said it's good, and it's got. And then there was the other guy's idea. And the other idea is told about the Garden of Eden. And this idea, God's much more limited because it can't just say, let there be. It's got to take dirt and fashion like a clay something, a human being. And then stick it in a garden, and then tell it, don't do this. That's like putting meat on your coffee table and telling your dog, don't go there. Yeah, real love. Real love. Oh, if you do go there, you're going to get in trouble. So this God, but before before they went there, they were naked and they had no shame. It's almost like in development with children. Remember, how many of you have had a child? Let's see some parents. Okay, good. And how many of you ever had them at like 2 and 3 years old running around the house naked? No shame. Where'd the shame come from? Put some clothes on. Which I guess is a good idea, especially if it's snowing outside. But otherwise, the idea can become so embedded. Like, oh, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. I'm wrong. Something's wrong. Which is eating of the tree of the knowledge, meaning I know good and evil. Now I know what's good and what's evil. Clothes are good. Naked is evil. Not just not appropriate, evil. How many of you remember things that your parents said and you actually took it like some sort of sin? I would do some things that my mother didn't like me to do, and I actually thought it was a sin. Now, my mother didn't believe in God, but I did. Scared her to death. But when she would say, don't do that, you're not supposed to do that, like, okay, I'll tell you, I'm going to confess my sin. I used to call numbers and say, is your refrigerator running? You better catch it. Then I'd hang up and laugh. My mother thought that was really bad. And so I thought I was sinning. Not just being a prank, not just being a kid. There was something really wrong with me. I had done something really wrong. Good and evil. Good and evil. And we stuck with that. And therefore, in that story, which is the story probably of another mystic's interpretation of humanity waking up, we can't exist where everything is taken care of because we all of a sudden can judge ourselves and others as wrong and evil. You can't exist in God consciousness when you're saying that's right and that's wrong and that's right and that's wrong and that's right and that's wrong and you're right and you're wrong. You can't exist in God consciousness. You're out. Now, God didn't really put us out. We put ourselves out. So we have to realize that is our story, and that's the story of the original sin. The original sin wasn't eating an apple. The original sin was what we did to make us feel like we were separate from our God and from others and from you and from nature. That was the original sin. Now, I need to. We don't do shame. Wish we could. This place would be full. Shame-filled churches are full. We don't do it. I just try to say what is true for me at this moment, and if it resonates with you, you'll come back. What resonates for me is that the mystics have tried to tell another story, whether it's Teilhard de Chardin or Meister Eckhart or Rumi or Hafiz or Jesus or any of the others that have written in them. I'm not as familiar with the Eastern texts, but it certainly does show up in the Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita. The mystics have spoke of another reality which could be our new storyline, and that reality is that we are divine waking up to that divinity. It's like we fell asleep and now we're waking up, and some people wake up sooner than others, and some people don't want to wake up, and some people will snooze for a while, but they all say that we're all going to wake up. We'll all wake up because the alarm will never go off. You can snooze, but you can't sleep in forever. And that's why I think when Jesus said in the Gospel according to Thomas, I've come and you're all asleep. In fact, you're having nightmares. And the nightmares come out of this belief that I'm on my own. I mean, the talk title for today is to debunk the story of I'm only human. You're human, but you're not only human. That only human stuff is a story of limitation, and I can't, and I won't, and it'll never happen, and besides that, it's little old me, and what can I do? Instead, if you allow yourself to move into the story that the mystics have told, you have a story about yourself as learning, growing, evolving, becoming, which is, do you see that those words have movement to them? Like, I'm here, but I can move. I can look at where I was and not be happy with it, but still I see myself evolving from it. I'm not there anymore. I'm moving forward. I'm not in Salt Lake City with a red organ behind me. Oh, and I didn't tell you, in Salt Lake City at that time, you could not buy booze, except if it was a private club. So we had our first church services at a private club, because they were willing to rent it to a cult. A cult. Weird stuff happens with us, like healings and things. But anyway, so this is awful. I wanted to be a minister so bad, I didn't have the gumption to say, this is tacky. Because they would have dancing on the floor and beer sloshed all over. And when I say tacky, it's literal. Nobody cleaned the floor from Saturday night to Sunday morning. So it smelled like old beer, and it walked like old beer, and the chairs were just there. And I didn't want to create a fuss, but I've evolved. Do you see, like, that wasn't bad, that was evolution. How many of you had a past that you wouldn't want to go back to? But you've evolved. That's what life does. That's what life does, unless you're stuck in a story that you can't. So if you see yourself as learning, growing, and evolving, then now's the time to create empowering self-descriptions that will allow you to evolve even faster. empowering self-descriptions. I've had a lot of self-descriptions. I've called myself stupid. I've called myself uncoordinated. I've called myself a logger's old lady. Don't try it now. I've called myself a lot of things, and now I want to create stories that will help me move forward in my evolution, that I'm not going to get, so that I don't stay where I am, because life grows. And life in us can grow. Maybe not, I wish, maybe not in height, but in experience and in talents and in expression, abilities. Jesus and his disciples spoke a language called Aramaic. And in Aramaic, that particular language, one word can mean a whole bunch of different things. So when it was translated into Greek, and then what we start to put the books together, they had to pick a word that would be translated into Greek. Like, out of 12, let's pick this one. And then it was even translated and translated and translated. And so then we get the Bible, and people call it unerring. And yet, no, it's open for interpretation. And one of the interpreters that I really appreciate is a student of Aramaic. And he looks at the words of Jesus, and he says, this is an okay interpretation, but it could also be this, and this. And he speaks about one in particular, which is, we've all heard it, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and the kingdom of heaven is within. Well, kingdom was also a realm. It was a realm. And so it was a realm of power. But it's within. You have a realm of power within you. And he was saying, seek that. But then he also said power could also be interpreted as I can. Seek within yourself the realm of I can. And how many of you fall back on the realm of I can't? How many of you, fall back on it's too late, or I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough, or I have this excuse? After first service, there was a woman who really wants to go to Peru, and she knew she wanted to go to Peru because she was talking to me about it in the lobby, and she started crying, and she said, "I guess I really want to go to Peru, but I," and all of the I can'ts started to come up. But I don't know if I can walk that much. Of course, I can run. I've got 2 new hips, and I can run. But I don't know. Do you see the fallback? What's normal is arguing for our limitations. What's normal is arguing for staying stuck where we are. The heart says, let's go, and the brain says, yeah, but. And so Jesus would say, seek ye that kingdom within yourself that says, I can. Move there. Not listen, and you know when you have a limitation because it'll be in your head and your heart will go, oh, really? I was so excited about that for a minute. So I walked her. I walked her from the door to the registration place. And I said, you're walking past your limitations. And she's going to go. And it's not about going. It's not whether she goes to Peru or not. It's about she saw her limitations for what they were. It was her arguments against having what her heart wanted. How many of you know what your heart wants? And how many of you have excuses for why you can't have it? Okay, I'm going to say this in the most holy way I can. Bullshit. That's not radical spirituality. That's same old. So listen then, after you have given yourself new self-descriptions, which is I'm capable, I'm worthy, I'm teachable, I'm flexible, I'm healthy. You give yourself new self-descriptions and then listen to your own inner knowing and cultivate your own divine direction, because the universe has set up all creation with instincts to know what's good for them. The birds know when to fly south or north because it's good for them. Insects know when to come out of the ground because it's good for them. but not us. We still do the same old thing, whether it's good for us or not, whether it's good for the planet or not, whether it's good for other people or not. We're the only ones that can defy instinct. Radical spirituality would say we really listen deeply. And we know what is ours to do for ourselves, for our family, our friends, and our planet. And it will probably lead us into expressing more of who we really are. You know, I have this gentleman that I've been coaching since I left Salt Lake City. We left at the same time, and he's been my prayer partner, he calls me, since we left. And I've told him so many times that I sometimes have a goal, and I don't necessarily need the goal. I need to become the person that I'll become if I even pursue that goal. It's not about the end. It's about the becoming. It's about the becoming. Evolving. The last thing I would say is that we practice daily acts of kindness and contribution. Because as we give, so we shall receive. And I wanted backup for this. I love this little book. You can tell I've used it a bunch. It's called The Runner's Bible, and it's just verses. Why read the whole Bible when somebody else has gone through and got the good stuff? Reader's Digest of the Bible. And in there, I turned to it this morning, and this is exactly what I needed to share with you. Turn about and do an act of kindness if seeming trouble depresses you. For by so doing, you make yourself part of the activity of God. Doing good makes you part of the activity of God. And before you are aware of it, your own affairs will have untangled. Loving service, not meddling, is a panacea for what most troubles you. Wow. So let's just take a deep breath. And I was reminded this morning when I was doing this talk, I could hear Ricky Byers. Ricky Byers has a song. We tried to sing it in Egypt, but Rafe didn't quite catch on. It was, in the land of I am, in the land of I am, more than I have been, I am. More than I ever will be, I am. More than I am. And when we understand that land of I am is the eternal I am. It is the Alpha and the Omega. It is the Ancient of Days. And then when we know that, we can sing as though it were true. We can sing not to affirm, but to declare. I am as God created me. In the light, in the love,